just as I would say among the teachers who trained with Marge Barstow, she had certain attitudes that weren't totally healthy, and you see traces of that amongst her teachers. I think it's inevitable. So I think it's important to just see what, you know, kind of look at the people like Alexander in a very be a bit detached and be prepared to find out some things about him that aren't so great. Personally, I kind of like Alexander. I think he's the kind of guy I'd like to hang out with. But he certainly had some retrograde attitudes. I mean, they weren't uncommon at the time, but you read his comments about the Ku Klux Klan and blacks in the South, and it's pretty embarrassing, really. And he he had some weird ideas, and we just need to make sure that we don't take that stuff on without, we don't inadvertently take any of that on ourselves.
Did FM Alexander discover anything important?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, whether he was the first person to ever discover these things, who knows? I don't know, but I think he did make some extremely important discoveries about human functioning, and did it probably, given who he was, pretty good job of packaging it in a way that could get it to survive, and long enough that it could kind of survive on its own without him. That's quite an accomplishment.
Well, reading Staring, I don't get the sense that FM discovered anything, but that rather he ripped it off from other people.
Right.
And was a great street fighter.
Yeah, I mean, you can find all the Alexander procedures, everything from hands on back of chair, table work, all that stuff. You can find someone else who was doing something that looked an awful lot like that. I'm sure he ripped off consciously and unconsciously stuff. It's hard to imagine he wouldn't have. He at one point he held himself out as I'm not sure I know how to pronounce this properly, Delacroix teacher. He was very influenced by that. I think he was a bit of a synthesizer in that sense, but I think his understanding of the connection between thought and movement, I think that was something that he actually discovered for himself. That's my sense. The stuff that you could say may or may not have ripped off from other people are some of his teaching procedures. Now, personally, I don't think the teaching procedures have much of an importance at all. I know there are teachers who disagree strongly with that. I know at least one teacher who thinks that the procedures are the core element of the work. I would disagree totally with that. I think the procedures are just procedures, and I think Alexander made it very clear several times. We have quotes from Marjorie Barlow about him saying to students on his training course, well, I want you to watch what I'm doing. I want you to understand why I'm doing it. And then I want you to figure out your own way to do it. He said, I don't want a bunch of monkeys copying me. And I don't think there's any clear way of expressing that interest on his part. He wanted people to figure out their own ways of conveying the work and their own ways of developing the work. He also said, that he was just the beginning. He was just pointing in a direction. And I think that idea of how important it is to understand how your thinking affects your movement, I think that was a genuine discovery of his based on his practical, the needs of his situation at the time.
So does the myth of FM losing his voice and then sitting in a room with mirrors and uncovering these essential principles of the technique, does that play a bigger role in the teaching of Alexander technique than the story of the founders of, say, Pilates or Feldenkrais?
I don't really know, because I think my sense of Pilates it's become today almost totally dissociated from anything Pilates himself would have recommended or thought was any good. Feldenkrais, I just don't know. What was his thing? A parachute ball that broke his leg or something? I don't know what his creation story is. Alexander's, I think there was some truth in it. I mean, I think he probably, I imagine the mirror part is accurate. I think the part that we really should drop from the storyline is that it took 10 years. For some reason, that number, or 9, some people say 9 years, that number, I just took it for granted for many years. It was just the number. But when you actually go and look at the timeline, it's a lot closer to 2 or 3 years.
Or even 18 months.
Could be. And that changes a lot, because that means, hell, anyone can do that, you know? I mean, he said anyone can do what I did if they'll do what I did. It takes it out of the realm of this thing where, gee, the founder took 10 years to figure it out, and now teachers need to train for 3 years to get the skills to teach it, which I think actually the 3 years is not a bad length. But it takes away a lot of the sort of mystery and the unattainability of it unless you take lots of lessons kind of idea. I just don't buy any of that. I totally disagree with all of that. I think there are people who can learn everything they need in 2 or 3 lessons or 2 or 3 group classes, and what they might need might not seem what you think they should need, but if they're happy, you know, I'm happy. So,
what do you find, what do you love, what do you hate about teaching Alexander technique?
Well, you get to meet a lot of different kinds of people, that's for sure. Quite a range of lifestyles and personalities. You learn a lot about human nature. I don't know that there's a lot I don't like. I sometimes find it frustrating when a student makes a bit of progress and finds that, and then a very common pattern in Alexander teaching, and again, Paul Collins talked about this many years ago. He once said that when you're working with a new student, the most dangerous point is when they make a big breakthrough and they notice it, because at that point, they kind of come up against, he didn't say this, but my theory is that people come up against the truth of the fact that they are actually responsible for themselves. And not everyone really wants to know about that or hear about that. And so some people, that's the very point at which they stop taking lessons. And I feel very sad about that. I guess another frustrating thing about being an Alexander teacher for me is when I see kids who are clearly messing up themselves with the way they're standing and moving, young kids, and you just know in 20 years they're going to have all kinds of problems probably, but you can't just go in there and tell their parents, you can't say to their parents, maybe if you're setting a bad example for them or whatever it is, you're not in that position that you can do that. And I find